Thanks everyone for joining this next edition of 30 Minutes with the Hacker. This is Jade Whitty. I'm a Solutions Development Manager with Tech Data, and I've got a number of engineers / hackers that are from Tech Data on the call that I'll kind of go through in just a minute. We also have CMA out of Baton Rouge, Adam Arceneaux and Ken Stringer, who have joined us from CNA, and we're really glad to have you on this call. So just a little bit of background real quick, because not everyone, these podcasts goes out. It's been going out for about a year and a half, and some of you may or may not be familiar with the team that we have here from Tech Data. And so I always like to kind of highlight that a little bit. All these guys, Brett Scott, Josh Harp, John Garner, Daniel Seth, Marshall Hall, and Dylan Hudson, all engineers that have been with Tech Data for a while now, but their backgrounds are really extensive in the ethical hacking. Let's just say, we'll just keep it that they've all been ethical hackers in their careers. But these guys are pulled in from our government and military at times, and are working, to fight the fight, definitely in the trenches, and some of the brightest ethical hackers that we have probably in our country. So just a wealth of knowledge there. And we always we try and pick their brains every month when we do these calls, and also include one of our partners who's strong in the security space to kind of get into the conversation. So the people that are participating today, we have Adam Arceneaux. He's the Director of Security for CMA. Just a little bit of background with him. He's been in the industry for about 15 years, but was a CISO for a global chemical manufacturing company. So a ton of experience actually in the trenches and been out there. Ken Stringer, ex-Marine for 26 years, and has been with CMA for 20 years and has a number of different roles that he's had. Currently, he's the Director of Infrastructure, and as well as handling all their technical services. So one of the two leaders really from a security perspective, and we wanted to have them on this call. So thank you guys for joining. Ken, why don't you tell us a little bit about CMA, just to kind of get things going here, just so everyone kind of knows what your company does.
Sure. Yes, we are a 35-year-old company based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we specialize in managed IT services, information security, data center solutions, and contract management. And we serve our customers throughout the Gulf states, primarily from the major service area, but we will service our customers beyond that and have done so from a global perspective as well.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining. So
Thank you.
Today's topic is very timely, as a lot of times when we do these calls, we're all in the same room, and maybe the partner that we have as the guest is remote, but we're all in a conference room, and we're all remote today. And that's because of the pandemic that's going on, and everyone's working from home, and so we're handling this call the same way, which really kind of brings us to the topic around remote access and the way we are handling things as companies are dealing with this. And I wanted to kind of let Adam set the table here for the discussion, but this is really all around remote access and what we're seeing from a hacker perspective and ways that you can secure it and challenges that customers are facing right now. So Adam, I'm gonna let you kind of set the table.
Yeah, thanks, Jade. So in Louisiana, we've been seeing kind of a move to secure remote access over the last 6 to 9 months. Really over the last year, we've had a huge spate of ransomware activity. Over 50 instances in the last year that were investigated by law enforcement. So, there's a lot more that didn't get to that level. And we've seen it at all levels, from local governments to the state of Louisiana itself, that have been infected and attacked by ransomware, really having a broad impact across the state. So it's been a lot in the news. It's been a lot on people's minds and kind of helped bring that awareness up. And so a good example, about 6 months ago, we had a customer that for years had just been using RDP open to the internet for their remote access, and they realized that wasn't a good idea with all the stuff in the news and things that have been happening. So we helped them move to Citrix and using MFA to secure that. And they're glad they did that now. Obviously, with everyone working remotely, we helped add some new licenses and new capabilities with everything going on with COVID-19, and they're ready to go. So we've been seeing this for a little while in our territory, but obviously over the last month, we've had a lot of customers really scrambling to kind of get their feet under them. We've got a number of small shops that we support, less than 20 users that just completely were not prepared to work remotely. Helping them kind of figure out how to order laptops. And when everyone's ordering laptops, that turns into a hard thing to try to figure out how to source those pieces. To really standing up VPN capabilities overnight and really stressing with them the importance of security, making sure they've got visibility into that remote workforce and multi-factor authentication, all those things. So that's been the focus of our technical team really the past month is trying to make sure everyone's got those capabilities and they're able to do their work remotely and keep their businesses functioning.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been a challenge, and we've kind of seen that across the board at Tech Data because we have so many partners that rely on us as we're partnering together, but they're stretched pretty thin as everyone's been scrambling to get set up remotely. So there's been there's issues around that, and you've got the hacking community that's taking advantage of it. So I don't know if some thoughts from our side that maybe you guys are seeing or comments on what Adam just covered.
Hi, this is Brett. So I got to say that one of the things that I think is interesting in the dynamic of cybersecurity is that this re-emphasizes the perimeter. In the last couple of years, a lot of de-emphasis has been put on the perimeter, and yet now more than ever, the perimeter is super relevant. So the interesting thing that has, in the business cycle here is that as companies have deprioritized their perimeter for other priorities, it may be that your perimeter is a little on the weak side. Maybe it's not been updated or it hasn't given enough care and attention. Maybe you have licensing that's expiring or has expired. So this is an opportunity for businesses to double check their situation and make sure that they have the appropriate protection at their company's perimeter.
And I think along those lines as well, Brett, that there is a re-emphasis around the basics that we've always talked about, specifically around end user training and awareness as to what they do when they're at home, because a lot of the security devices and appliances that could be afforded to them at the office and at the workplace that they're unaware of because they are passively protecting them now become the devices are dependent upon the infrastructure that they're in. And as most of us know, end users will click on just about anything without thinking twice if they're in their modes of autopilot. And so when they're at home, they're now dependent upon the endpoint security that they have on their workstations and ensuring that those traditional AVs, if those are what are deployed and there's not an EDR system on the laptops, have their signatures up to date and have been updated with the mothership, so to speak, so that they can protect against the latest emerging threats that may be faced by an end user through just drive-by downloads on a browser.
This is Adam. I just wanted to add, we've got a managed service around end user training where we do phishing and we do training for our users, and we've definitely seen a huge uptick in requests and kind of meetings around that in the last month. People we've talked to maybe a year ago about it that said, oh yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe we'll do that eventually. And now I think they're realizing that it is more important than ever to stay in front of their users and keep them trained. We're seeing it in the news. We're seeing people, kind of the awareness that the bad guys are taking advantage of this crisis and taking advantage of the susceptibility of users being remote. And so we're seeing a lot more interest from our customers that have maybe been putting this off, realizing that they need to get it back in front of them and need to get it in front of their users quickly.
Completely, great point. And so now more than ever, the ability to monitor your endpoints with people who know what they're looking at is essential. And for most companies, that answer is to use an MSSP because it's unlikely they're going to be able to attract and retain the kind of talent that they need to protect their business. When the economy has had a stutter as it has, our businesses are more fragile than ever. So now is the most important time to invest in your actual future as a company by hiring cybersecurity professionals through an MSSP that know what they're looking at to help protect you, business, your employees, and your assets.
Yeah, exactly to Brett's point, because if it's important to have somebody watching what's coming across the wire, because when and when your users actually click on a link, somebody's got to be watching for that alert and be able to take the appropriate actions.
And something to expand upon the whole user awareness training aspect of this is most users, even if they do kind of think about what they're doing, they think about it in terms of protecting themselves, which is obviously important. But something that they need to be aware of now when they are working from home is, like what was touched on by Josh earlier, when you're in the corporate environment, you have all these passive protections like a firewall, like a proxy that does content filtering. But if you're using your work laptop at home, and you're using it on your own time, and you're not VPN'd into the network, you lose a lot of those protections. You're reliant on your own devices at home. And then if you click on something you shouldn't and you get infected, not only do you put yourself at risk, but then the following day when you connect back to the corporate network, you are now exposing your corporate environment to whatever malware you might have happened to have downloaded. So that's kind of a double whammy.
That's a really good point, John. And I don't think that can be emphasized enough. But adding to that, you also have all of your staff using or making use of technologies they're not necessarily very familiar with. And so that simply adds to the level of risk to an organization. You have less experience with tools. You have the potential zombie apocalypse of your employees clicking on things while they were offline, but then they connect online and all of a sudden they dump all of that nastiness onto your network. So it's a really big issue, and companies really have to focus and sharpen their focus on cybersecurity.
One of the things that I know that we're hearing about in the news is Zoom has seen a huge uptick in people getting set up with that collaboration and conferencing technology, and there's been Zoom bombing is one of the things that we've heard, and where hackers are getting in and hijacking meetings. And there's some things that we can do to protect it. I'm just curious, express my naivete on. So let's say someone does hack your Zoom. I get that they can interject into the conversation. They could put something on the screen and they could deface it, do anything like that. Is there something beyond that they're able to do when they hijack it that's a lot more sinister, that we're exposing ourselves to with these Zoom bombings?
Well, it's easier to help people understand risk when they translate the cybersecurity world to their daily lives. So most organizations have some form of security because they would not feel comfortable with any number of strangers sitting inside their offices, observing and hearing all the communications of your staff between your employees, the vendors, each other, etc. So if you're dependent upon conferencing and someone has the ability to lurk or listen to everything that's being said in all of your private meetings, then you can understand the risk to your company from that perspective.
Yeah. Do you know if they're able to remove their name from the screen and just be listening in, and no one even realizes that someone is there lurking if they're not paying attention to the participants?
That's a potential risk, but to be honest with you, I don't think most people actually take a full account of who's on the meeting. I mean, if you have any meeting above 5 or 6 people, most people are not going to check the list and say, why is Bob here twice? They'll just assume he's on his phone and on his computer and not even ask. So he wouldn't have to hide.
I think that's why with Zoom specifically, right, you can take certain precautions to make sure that doesn't happen. For example, you can actually put a password on the Zoom meeting, so people have to, they can't just randomly guess your meeting ID. They also have to know the password. And then you can also implement waiting rooms, so that even if the person does join, the host of the meeting then has to allow that person to actually step into the conference. So you have multiple layers of protection, and everybody is aware of who is joining the meeting at any given time.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to highlight that if any organization out there was to see what was going on right now with Zoom and say, what should I be doing if they were in the software development space or the application space, Zoom is actually approaching this from the appropriate mindset. There's been feedback online where we see the Zoom CEO is sending out thank you letters to the researchers, and now dissenters among us could say, well, that's because they're in the spotlight. They have to react appropriately, or they're going to receive public shaming. Okay, so be it. But imagine the onslaught that they've had, right? A number of hackers, gray or white, black, whatever their hats are, and whatever their affiliations, are now at home and using their time to take a critical look at an application being used to help facilitate business, and are responsibly, in many cases, disclosing the vulnerabilities that are found. Researchers had disclosed Zoom zero days, which were enabling a hacker with local access to Zoom sessions to take over the software and install malware. You're talking about risks beyond Zoom bombing. Well, if someone were to Zoom bomb you and aware of this attack vector, they could have taken it over. But Zoom has been taking the appropriate steps necessary to ensure mitigation of the vulnerabilities as they are disclosed. They are opening up channels of communication with bug bounty hunters out there, and researchers to help take a critical look at their application and secure it beyond where it's at today. Many organizations out there who are in this space may not have been as receptive as Zoom has been, and again, it could just be that they're in the public eye. But this goes well beyond to show what people are doing with their time to help benefit the collective, so to speak.
Yes, exactly, because Zoom has actually advertised that they're putting a freeze on any new developments for their software. So taking what Josh has said, they're taking all that data and everything that they're putting in from their bug track data and securing the actual product as it sits right now, and not implementing anything new that could possibly introduce more security holes into their software.
Great point. What are you guys seeing out there from CMA? Are you finding most of your customers already have some collaboration software, or is there a scramble for getting set up with you guys?
I think it's been some of both. We've had customers that have had collaboration, but maybe there's only 3 or 4 people that had a WebEx account, for instance, and now they need to expand that licensing. But then we've also had some who've never had a need for it in the past, and are needing to get something pretty quickly. And so luckily most of these tools are pretty user-friendly. It's kind of getting them set up, and then as far as training and learning how to use it is pretty straightforward. But it's definitely been some of both of those we've seen.
So what are some other areas that you guys are seeing, and I'll open this to both sides. What are some other things that we're seeing from a remote hacker vectors, and maybe we can talk a little bit about phishing emails and what we're seeing from kids that are doing their work at home and trying to get, how that's being exploited. So let's just shift the conversation a little bit onto those topics.
Yeah, so I think this comes into the space of users potentially accessing company applications maybe not on the default systems they've been assigned, right? So users who may open up their email, whether it's through Office 365 or another application on maybe their personal laptop. Some things to take into consideration there is you as an end user don't always have the same security controls and standards that the company you work for has, right? We hit on this earlier with some of the feedback John was providing about what kind of controls an MSSP or an organization puts in place to protect their users at work. We, in different conversations during 30 Minutes with Hacker, have talked about how hackers are just waiting for, and adversaries are just waiting for that moment to really strike him with full force. And I think it was funny during April Fool's, Brett put out a post around how all these big nation states had decided during the coronavirus outbreak that they were going to cease all offensive cybersecurity operations. And there were people within the thread responding, asking for the source link and asking for the news article and seeking out the information. And I think that is what a lot of people have also forgotten. yes, it's good that our communities are coming together and that we're trying to combat this virus and defeat it. But beyond that, we also have to take into consideration our own vigilance as users, right? One of the things we constantly talk about in social engineering is autopilot modes. Autopilot, if you just think of it in the terms of aviation, it's the same thing for a human. Our minds, depending upon our environment, will go into a certain autopilot mode and stay in that and work through that. Right now, our work autopilot, if we would like to categorize it as such, has in many ways been disrupted. We're in a new environment. We're trying to figure out what our home office is going to look like. What's most ergonomic? Do we need one monitor or two? All these different first world problems that we're having to try and figure out how we're going to best work from home, right? But beyond that, we also have to take into consideration that, yes, maybe those social engineering test emails that we receive during that one period of time that we've fell for and succumbed to and had to go through the training, can I recall that training? Can I identify a social engineering email if it comes into my inbox? And do I know the appropriate people within my organization that I need to send or forward up a copy of that to, so that they know that there are potentially attacks on the horizon, right? We've talked about, again, in these calls, the primary measures external threat actors are going to use to get into your environment is social engineering. I can't recall if we talked about malvertising and drive-bys. If we did, it's important to highlight that again, because many users don't realize the types of controls that they have while at work that now they don't have at all while at home. And I think for many organizations out there that are listening, it might be important to have your CISO or your security administrator, or someone who talks saliently about security in your organization, to send out a notice of 10 steps that should be taken for good cyber hygiene at home, so that users are abreast to what they should be doing, because it's now going to translate into your kids. Because if we think about it, kids are now at home doing school.
That's a very good point, and as a great example of something immediately relevant in this moment during the COVID crisis, is most people are expecting their stimulus checks. So the bad guys have moved in and they are posing with phone calls and emails and things like that as the IRS, saying, hey, we're trying to send you your check, but we're having difficulty. Could you verify your bank account so we can transfer your stimulus check? They're also doing the same thing with method. All they're trying to do is exploit people's lack of understanding as to how the IRS will be sending you your stimulus check. And they, around your knowledge or lack of knowledge, they will fill in with their quote unquote expertise. And because we're dealing with things like social security numbers and bank accounts, they're all going crazy trying to get to you and your lack of knowledge about how this is going to be. So for the record, the IRS will not be contacting you ever, and they will simply send you the money. So whether they're depositing it directly into your bank account because you filed electronically, or they send you a paper check, one way or the other, you're going to get it. It's just going to magically appear. You don't have to do anything else other than file your tax return. So the fact that most people don't know that or didn't know that is exactly where the bad guys are going to infill and try to steal very critical PII from you.
Yeah, great point, Brett. Anyone want to add to this piece here?
Yeah, this is Adam. I'll just say, kind of interesting in kids working from home or schooling from home. My son's in middle school, and his computer teacher actually assigned kind of cybersecurity training for them as one of their homework assignments, where they're actually going through and learning about phishing and keeping your information safe online, and kind of social engineering and how to use social networking safely, which with my background was great to see. Was really excited to see him learning that at his age and kind of going through those exercises. So hopefully some of the schools are taking advantage of this and kind of this new remote work, remote school environment to teach them some of those lessons early, and it'll get ingrained pretty quick.
Yeah, considering they're going to be our next generation workforce, what a great opportunity to get upskilling to make them more work ready.
Yeah, Josh, I think you had a comment on that when we chatted about this before with kids and getting them trained at home, and there being a gap there. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what we just said.
Well, it was encouraging to hear Adam's story, and I think the reason for that is within many robotics or computer classes at schools, security isn't at the forefront of their education. You talk to educators, they sometimes don't know how to speak to security and how to train towards it because it's an ever evolving concept. The goalposts are constantly moved in security, and that's why you have to stay up to date and constantly in the trenches with it so that you know what's going on around you. And I think this is a time where families can even come together and talk about one, digital privacy and security, but two, different things that they as a family can be doing around how they work with the systems that they have at home. Because I'm sure there's a lot of end users who don't realize they have to update the modem firmware that they have or the router firmware that they have in their environment. Many homes today have a lot of different types of IoT that they've used to automate their life. And we've talked in previous 30-minute with a hacker calls of how vulnerable and susceptible IoT is to these types of attacks. If you think of it from the mindset that, well, I'm secure. I've read all the documents. I know what our company's usage policy is, and I know what our security policies is, and I know who to contact. That's great. But what happens if the bridge point, so to speak, into your home network is the system that your child is using because your child isn't aware of what measures they need to take around security? So I think it's great that that educator is doing it. We need more educators doing that because, as Brett alluded to, this is going to be our next workforce. And if we can start training kids around the concepts of security early on, it's going to be something that is ingrained into their daily lives already. So if we go back to that autopilot analogy, right, they'll have inherent aspects of security already in and around what they do. So they will be they'll become a better human firewall, so to speak, but then they can also share that knowledge with their other classmates and those that are around them as to things that they should also be doing to secure themselves.
When we were chatting before we came on, Ken brought up a really good point about business continuity. I don't know if you wanted to add into this conversation with that.
Yeah, sure. I could definitely do that. I mean, this is the pandemic or COVID crisis has definitely changed the way we think and the way we work. But in essence, though, I mean, a lot of your companies, if not all of them, should be looking at this as a business continuity item as well. I mean, you guys brought up different levels of risk, and which goes into the risk mitigation, and a lot of this falls into business continuity. It needs to add a cyber feel to it, just in the relation of what do we do if we have an event that then leads us to having a work from home problem to contend with, and then we do get infections based on that, and it turns into a critical need of business continuance. I mean, there's different angles that we can look at this that really need to be thought of from a policy standpoint, a procedural standpoint. Having, and it was mentioned in our prior to, is that having your employees go back and understand acceptable use policies or any other policies pertaining to the cyber side of things, and making sure that these all kind of fall in line with each other, and just have that mindset of preparedness for the next time that this may or may not happen.
Yeah, we all hope that this is the last time our nation and the world faces something like this, but the statistics around that it might not support the goodwill and hope notion. So preparing for the worst is always necessary, right? Even from a business standpoint, analyzing what your risks are and understanding what the threat landscape is, and then putting policies and procedures and technology in place to help facilitate a better outcome for that. And so I like that advice, because many people might say, well, I'm never going to face this again. We're gonna get rid of these things, and they're never gonna come back, and we're gonna be better afterwards, right? We'll fight this together, and we'll be okay. But we need to take into consideration to learn from our mistakes of the past, the things we weren't prepared for going into this, and how we can prepare for something like this in the future if it were to happen, right? And then have our ducks in a row so that it's an easier rollout, right? People are ready. They know how to use their their video conferencing system. Remote users know how to access the VPN and the resources they need to get where they need to go. And we can hit the ground running faster and quicker and be able to, work the way we should successfully.
A great wrap up, Josh. Thank you for summarizing and kind of bringing it home. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I just want to say thank you, Adam and Ken from CMA, for being our guests on the call and giving us your insights and experience and sharing. Thanks everyone else that was on the call from a tech data perspective, and look forward to next month's call on 30 Minutes with a Hacker. Thank you.